Know anything? Can you tell us a little bit about what will happen to normal Norma?
I can't tell you too much, but only that she gets a little wild, a little wilder.
Maybe a new love interest, I hear?
Maybe.
Picture this. A beautiful blonde actress at the height of her fame meets a married music producer on a sailboat in the Bahamas. What starts as an innocent encounter becomes a secret 5-year relationship that shocked Hollywood when it finally came to light. But the real scandal wasn't their interracial marriage in 1974. It was what Quincy Jones was hiding behind closed doors for 15 years that would break Peggy Lipton's heart and change their family forever. This is the untold story of Peggy Lipton and Quincy Jones. A love story that began with genuine passion but ended with devastating betrayals. By the time you reach the end of this video, you'll understand why their marriage looked perfect from the outside but was crumbling from within, and how one shocking confession in 2018 revealed the painful truth that Peggy had kept secret for decades. Peggy Lipton was born on August 30th, 1946, in New York City, to what seemed like the perfect American family. Her father was a successful lawyer who had graduated from Harvard, and her mother was an artist from a well-respected Jewish family. They lived in Lawrence, Nassau County, one of the wealthiest suburbs in New York, surrounded by other successful, educated families who cared deeply about maintaining their social status. But beneath this polished surface, dark secrets were eating away at young Peggy's childhood. Her family carried the weight of generational trauma, particularly from her mother's side, whose relatives had fled Latvia as Jewish refugees during times of terrible persecution. The pain and fear from those experiences had been passed down through the family, creating an atmosphere where appearances mattered more than honesty, and where problems were hidden rather than solved. When Peggy was around 7 years old, something happened that would change her life forever. She developed a severe stutter that was so bad she sometimes couldn't even say her own name. The happy, talkative little girl suddenly became quiet and withdrawn, dreading every moment at school when she might be called upon to speak. The embarrassment and frustration of not being able to communicate normally turned her into a different person entirely. The adults in her life dismissed her stutter as just a phase that she would eventually outgrow, never connecting it to the deeper emotional damage she was carrying. But Peggy knew the truth. Her speech problems were her body's way of expressing pain that she couldn't put into words. She later described becoming morbid and gloomy during this time, sometimes imagining her own death and holding her breath to see what it might feel like to die. At the age of 15, Peggy's life took a dramatic turn when her father helped her sign with the famous Eileen Ford modeling agency. It was an incredible opportunity for a teenager who could barely speak her own name without stuttering, but it also pushed her into an adult world she wasn't emotionally ready for. She was tall and slender, with striking ash blonde hair and large brown eyes that photographs captured beautifully. Soon, Peggy's face was appearing in fashion magazines all across the country. From the outside, she was living every teenage girl's dream. She was beautiful, successful, and making money doing something that seemed glamorous and exciting. But on the inside, she was still the same damaged little girl, now using marijuana, cocaine, and diet pills to cope with the pain and pressure she felt every day. The irony of her situation was heartbreaking. She could pose for photographers and look confident and beautiful in pictures that millions of people would see. But at night, she would lie awake worrying about having to speak on set the next day. She learned to avoid certain words that were particularly difficult for her to say, living in constant fear that her speech problems would be discovered and ruin her career. In 1964, when Peggy was 18, her family made a sudden move to Los Angeles. This change would transform her life in ways she never expected. Within months of arriving in California, she had left her family home and moved to Topanga Canyon, where she immersed herself completely in the counterculture movement that was taking over the area. She embraced yoga, meditation, vegetarianism, and the music scene with the enthusiasm of someone who had finally found where she belonged. She later described attending the famous Monterey Pop Festival in 1967 as a spiritual awakening, surrounded by people who looked and lived like she wanted to live. During this time, she also experimented with peyote, alongside British actor Terence Stamp. seeking freedom from the pain and constraints of her childhood. While this newfound freedom was exciting, it was also dangerous for someone who was still carrying such deep emotional wounds. Peggy was using drugs and alternative experiences to escape her problems rather than dealing with them, setting up patterns that would follow her for years to come. That same year, Peggy signed a contract with Universal Pictures, marking a major step forward in her career. But this advancement came with its own cruel twist. Acting required speaking clearly and confidently, the very thing her stutter made most difficult for her. She often had to pretend she had forgotten her lines when her stutter made it impossible to speak, though she discovered that when she read from a script, the words flowed much more easily than in normal conversation. Universal placed her in whatever roles they thought would suit her, and as a young actress under contract, she had no choice but to accept whatever they offered. Her television debut came in 1965, when she was 19 years old, appearing on The John Forsythe Show. It was a modest beginning, but it marked the moment when Peggy began transitioning from modeling into serious acting work. Over the next few years, she appeared in popular television shows like Bewitched, The Virginian, The Invaders, The Road West, The FBI, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and Mr. Novak. Each appearance put her in front of audiences who were loyal to their favorite shows and open to discovering new faces. Her work on The Alfred Hitchcock Hour was particularly important because it gave her experience with psychological suspense, a genre that would later shape her most famous role in Twin Peaks. In 1968, Peggy made her film debut in The Pictured Blue, a western that also starred her brother Robert Lipton. Working alongside established actors like Terence Stamp, Joanna Pettit, and Carl Malden gave her valuable experience with the different pace and scale of movie making compared to television work. But it was later in 1968 that Peggy's career and life changed forever when she was cast as Julie Barnes in The Mod Squad. This role would make her famous around the world and turn her into a cultural icon, but it would also bring pressures and complications that she wasn't prepared to handle. When The Mod Squad premiered on September 24, 1968, it gave television something completely new and revolutionary. Peggy's character, Julie Barnes, was a runaway from a troubled home who had been arrested for vagrancy and was now working as an undercover police officer alongside two other young outcasts. The show broke television rules by using hippie characters as the heroes and tackling controversial subjects that other programs wouldn't touch. Julie Barnes was a bridge between the establishment and rebellious youth culture, and Peggy's delicate, vulnerable performance made the character feel real and relatable. She didn't stutter when reading lines from a script, which gave her a freedom in acting that she had never experienced in real life. Playing someone else allowed her to express emotions and confidence that her own damaged psyche couldn't access. Her performance earned her 4 Emmy nominations in a row from 1969 to 1972, along with 4 Golden Globe nominations. In 1971, at just 24 years old, she won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a television series drama, making her one of the youngest actresses ever to receive this honor. This victory was particularly meaningful because it came during the height of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement, making her award more than just a personal achievement. Peggy's sudden fame also sparked a fashion revolution that swept across America. Her long, straight ash blonde hair, miniskirts, bell-bottom pants, and love beads became a national trend. Fashion magazines showcased the Julie Barnes look, and department stores sold Mod Squad-inspired clothing lines. Hair salons across the country had women requesting the Peggy Lipton cut. Ironically, despite being at the center of this cultural phenomenon, Peggy had no interest in fame or the spotlight. She later admitted that being famous made her feel paranoid and anxious, adding another layer of stress to her already complicated emotional life. Her style had softened the image of hippie culture for mainstream America, making it fashionable rather than threatening. But she was too insecure to truly enjoy her success. Behind the cameras, Peggy's personal life was chaotic and painful. She suffered from severe social anxiety that made her rarely want to leave her house, and she dreaded any interactions with the press or public. Her childhood trauma, including the severe stutter that had once made it difficult to say her own name, continued to haunt her, even as millions of people admired her on television every week. Her romantic relationships during this time were just as turbulent as her internal emotional state. At 18, she had begun an affair with Paul McCartney during the height of Beatlemania. In 1968, she had a brief romance with Elvis Presley, though she later claimed he was struggling with impotence, at the time due to his drug use. She also had relationships with actors like Terence Stamp, Keith Moon of The Who, and record producer Lou Adler. Despite being adored by millions of fans and having her choice of famous, successful men to date, Peggy described herself as deeply lonely and isolated. She often chose emotionally unavailable partners and admitted that her love affairs were more about fantasy and escape than genuine connection. The dark thoughts that had plagued her as a child continued into adulthood. She sometimes imagined her own death and would try to experience what her last breath might feel like. The entertainment industry had begun exploiting Peggy when she was just 15 years old, pushing her into a world that sexualized her before she was emotionally mature enough to handle it. By 17, she had learned to use her looks as protection for her damaged self-esteem, and she was regularly using marijuana, cocaine, and diet pills to cope with depression and anxiety. The demanding shooting schedule for the Mod Squad left her exhausted and withdrawn. By the end of the show's 5-year run, she was completely burned out and even more isolated than before. The very system that had made her famous had also left her struggling to maintain any sense of who she really was underneath the public image. It was during this vulnerable time in 1969 that fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Peggy was just 22 years old, and at the absolute peak of her fame when a mutual friend invited her on a boat trip to the Bahamas. On that sailboat, gently swaying in the crystal blue waters, she met Quincy Jones for the first time. Quincy was already an established and respected figure in the music industry, known for his work as a composer, arranger, and producer. But there was one major complication. He was married to Swedish model Ulla Andersson. Peggy later said she felt an immediate and powerful attraction to Quincy, a kind of connection she had never experienced before. But she was also realistic about the situation and kept her feelings carefully controlled, knowing there was no point in pursuing someone who was already committed to someone else. That sunny afternoon on the boat came and went, but the memory of meeting Quincy stayed with Peggy in a way that surprised her. Neither of them realized at the time that this chance encounter would be the beginning of a love story that would captivate Hollywood and challenge social attitudes for decades to come. For the next 5 years, Peggy carried the memory of that meeting while continuing her career and dating other high-profile men like Elvis Presley and Ryan O'Neal. But something about her connection with Quincy had been different, deeper, and more meaningful than her other relationships. She couldn't forget the way he had made her feel during their brief conversation on the boat. In 1974, Peggy began hearing whispers through Hollywood social circles that Quincy had separated from his wife. The timing that had been wrong 5 years earlier suddenly seemed to be aligning. Gathering her courage, she reached out to Quincy through his daughter Jolie, curious to see if there might now be a chance for something between them. Jolie returned with an answer that made Peggy both laugh and feel hopeful. She was told she was in the top 10 of women interested in her father. When Quincy later elaborated on this message, he added with characteristic charm, "But you had a bullet, baby," meaning she was quickly moving to number 1 on his list. When they reconnected, the spark between them reignited instantly and powerfully. Within just 2 weeks of getting back in touch, Peggy had moved into Quincy's Los Angeles home. She even took cooking lessons before moving in, because she knew Quincy was old-fashioned in some ways and didn't trust women who couldn't handle themselves in the kitchen. Quincy was so committed to having Peggy close to him that he installed a movie editing machine in their bedroom so he could work on scoring films without being separated from her. This gesture showed how seriously he took their relationship and how much he wanted to integrate their professional and personal lives. Their happiness was suddenly threatened in 1974 when Quincy, who was 41 years old, suffered 2 life-threatening brain aneurysms. The first one struck without warning while he was at home with Peggy. He later described the sensation as feeling like the back of my head had been taken off with a shotgun blast. The pain was so severe and sudden that Peggy was terrified she was going to lose him just as they had found each other. Doctors operated on Quincy for 7.5 hours to repair the damage from the first aneurysm, only to discover during surgery that he had a second aneurysm that was close to bursting. They immediately performed a second operation, removing part of his skull and securing it back in place with 6 metal clips. His condition was so serious that friends began preparing a memorial service at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, expecting him to die. Quincy later said the experience felt like attending his own funeral while still being alive. The surgeries saved his life, but they ended his career as a trumpet player forever, since the pressure from playing the instrument could potentially cause fatal complications. During this frightening and uncertain time, as Quincy struggled to recover, he and Peggy made the decision to get married, sealing a bond that had been forged through survival as much as love. Their wedding in 1974 immediately thrust them into the harsh spotlight of America's ongoing struggles with racial prejudice. Peggy wrote in her autobiography years later that dealing with racism became a part of their daily lives in ways she had never anticipated. Police officers would frequently pull them over when they were driving together, assuming that Peggy, a blonde white woman, must be a prostitute being forced to ride in a black man's car. These humiliating encounters happened so often that they came to expect them as part of their routine. The prejudice they faced was painful enough when it came from strangers, but it cut much deeper when it came from Peggy's own family. Her mother openly told her that she couldn't imagine her daughter with a black man or raising mixed-race children. The comments were so hurtful that Peggy eventually gave her mother an ultimatum: accept the relationship or lose her daughter forever. This threat stopped the open opposition from her family, but the emotional damage lingered for years. Peggy's mother had once told her she had imagined her daughter ending up with a white Prince Charming or a great Jewish king, making it clear that Quincy, no matter how successful or talented, would never be what she had wanted for her daughter. In March 1976, Peggy and Quincy welcomed their first daughter, Kidada. 2 years later, in February 1978, their second daughter, Rashida, was born. Having biracial children in the 1970s added another complicated layer to the social challenges there. Family-faced, mixed-race children at that time often dealt with identity confusion, prejudice from both black and white communities, and difficulty finding their place in a society that preferred clear racial categories. Kidada eventually left her predominantly white private school to attend a public high school where most students were black, finding that she felt more comfortable and accepted there. Rashida had a different experience, first encountering serious racial tension when she attended Harvard University during the height of identity politics discussions in the 1990s. Both daughters would go on to have successful careers in entertainment, with Rashida becoming famous for her roles in Parks and Recreation and films like The Social Network, while Kidada appeared in music videos and had a well-publicized relationship with rapper Tupac Shakur. Their early experiences dealing with racial prejudice helped shape their commitment to multicultural causes and diversity advocacy throughout their adult lives. When The Mod Squad ended its run in 1973, Peggy was just 27 years old, and at what should have been the peak of her acting career. She had won a Golden Globe, earned 4 Emmy nominations, and could have easily secured leading roles in films and television shows for decades to come. Instead, she made the shocking decision to step away from acting completely to focus on raising her daughters. Peggy later explained that she felt completely burned out after 5 years of constant work on the Mod Squad and had grown increasingly withdrawn and insecure from all the attention and pressure of fame. Her break from Hollywood lasted 15 years, with only one exception: a brief return in 1979 for the television movie The Return of the Mod Squad. By the time she made this decision, Kidada was 2 years old and Rashida was just born, and Peggy was determined to be fully present for them during their childhood years. She later admitted that when Twin Peaks came along in 1990, she didn't even remember how to contact agents or managers to put herself forward for roles because she had been away from the business for so long. Her choice to turn down other offers during those years likely cost her millions of dollars in potential earnings, but it clearly showed where her priorities lay. Rashida would later describe her mother as the most unconditionally loving person, and credited Peggy with being a constant source of support at auditions and throughout her own career development. While Peggy was focused on family life, Quincy's career reached incredible new heights. He produced Michael Jackson's Off the Wall in 1979, and later the record-breaking Thriller album in 1982, establishing himself as one of the most successful producers in music history. The success brought fame, fortune, and unfortunately, temptations that would eventually destroy their marriage. For years, Peggy and Quincy seemed like the perfect Hollywood couple. They appeared happy and united at public events, and their interracial marriage had become a symbol of progress and love conquering prejudice. But by the mid-1980s, their relationship was quietly falling apart behind closed doors. Quincy later admitted that he was dealing with 7 of the top 10 most stressful life events simultaneously during this period. His demanding work schedule in the music industry left him emotionally and physically drained, and his mother's declining health added additional pressure at home. Peggy, who had sacrificed her career at its peak to focus on their family, was also feeling the weight of isolation and unfulfilled ambitions. Their beautiful Bel Air home, which had once been filled with laughter and music, gradually became a place of tension, filled with arguments and growing emotional distance between them. By 1986, after 12 years of marriage, they made the difficult decision to separate. Their daughters, Kidada and Rashida, were only 12 and 10 years old at the time, making the situation even more heartbreaking for everyone involved. To the public, the news of their separation came as a complete shock because they had always appeared so deeply in love and committed to each other. In reality, people close to them knew that they had been drifting apart for several years as their individual pressures and challenges grew more overwhelming. During their 3-year separation, Peggy focused on raising their daughters, while Quincy continued his incredibly demanding work schedule. The arrangement put enormous stress on both parents and created confusion and sadness for Kidada and Rashida, who couldn't understand why their seemingly perfect family was falling apart. On October 10th, 1989, Peggy officially filed for divorce in Los Angeles, citing irreconcilable differences as the reason for ending their marriage. She requested joint custody of their daughters and financial support, bringing a legal conclusion to a relationship that had begun 20 years earlier when they met on a friend's boat in the Bahamas. The divorce was finalized in 1990, officially closing the chapter on one of Hollywood's most famous and groundbreaking interracial marriages. Behind the legal terminology lay years of accumulated pain, career pressures, and betrayals that had slowly eroded the foundation of their love. One of the most devastating betrayals wouldn't be revealed until decades later. In a shocking 2018 interview when he was 84 years old, Quincy made an admission that stunned everyone who heard it. He casually revealed that he had maintained relationships with 22 different girlfriends around the world during his marriage to Peggy. He named cities from Cape Town to Shanghai, where these women lived, and claimed that all of the women knew about each other and about his marriage. Even more disturbing, he mentioned that his daughters had to set age limits for the women he dated because some of his girlfriends were actually younger than Kidada and Rashida. This confession made it painfully clear that Peggy had endured far more betrayal and humiliation during their marriage than the public had ever known. For 15 years, she had kept these secrets while trying to maintain their family and protect their daughters from knowing the full extent of their father's infidelity. The revelation also explained why their divorce had been so emotionally devastating for Peggy, and why she had struggled with depression and isolation for years afterward. She had not only lost her husband and the father of her children, But she had also discovered that their entire marriage had been built on lies and deception that she had been unaware of for most of their time together. The impact of their parents. Divorce left lasting effects on both Kidada and Rashida. After the split in 1990, 16-year-old Kidada chose to live primarily with Quincy, while 14-year-old Rashida stayed with Peggy. This arrangement meant that the sisters grew up in different environments during their crucial teenage years, each shaped by their respective parents' approach to dealing with the aftermath of the failed marriage. Rashida later said that while the divorce was difficult for both girls, their parents' continued closeness helped make the transition easier than it might have been otherwise. Even so, holidays, birthdays, and family celebrations became complicated logistics rather than simple joyful gatherings, and the division of their family home left emotional scars that both daughters carried into adulthood. Despite all the pain and betrayal, Peggy and Quincy managed to maintain a respectful relationship focused on co-parenting their daughters. They worked together on family matters and continued to show up for important events in Kidada and Rashida's lives, presenting a united front even though their marriage had ended. In 2005, Peggy published her memoir, Breathing Out, which ran 310 pages and was co-written with David and Coco Dalton. The book stripped away the soft, glamorous image that people thought they knew and revealed the raw truth about her life behind the scenes. She wrote openly about her relationships with Paul McCartney and Elvis Presley, her experiences with sexual abuse during childhood, her struggles with drug use, and an abortion she had undergone. She also detailed the painful racism she and Quincy had faced during their marriage, including her own mother's difficulty accepting their relationship. The book's unflinching honesty made it a bestseller and gave readers a completely different understanding of what Hollywood had really been like during the 1960s and 1970s. In 2004, at the age of 58, Peggy received devastating news. She had been diagnosed with colon cancer. The diagnosis came just after she had completed a successful stage run in The Vagina Monologues, marking another transition point in her life. Her treatment likely included surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, stretching over several months, and requiring tremendous physical and emotional strength. She fought the disease with the same determination that had carried her through childhood trauma, career challenges, and personal heartbreak. Her victory over cancer was something she called her most recent triumph in her memoir, and her daughter Rashida said the experience brought their family closer together than they had been in years. It would be another 15 years before the cancer returned, but her initial recovery demonstrated the resilience that had defined her entire life. Even facing a potentially fatal illness, Peggy found ways to maintain hope and continue moving forward. When Peggy returned to acting after her 15-year hiatus, she proved that her talent had only deepened with age and experience. Her role as Norma Jennings in Twin Peaks became beloved by fans around the world and showed a different side of her acting abilities. The character was warm, nurturing, and grounded, very different from the troubled Julie Barnes, who had made her famous decades earlier. Her performance in Twin Peaks earned critical praise and introduced her to a new generation of viewers who had never seen The Mod Squad. For many people, Norma Jennings became their primary association with Peggy Lipton, replacing her earlier image as a counterculture icon with that of a caring small-town restaurant owner. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Peggy continued working in television, appearing in shows like Crash and Popular. She also had the special experience of working alongside her daughter Rashida in Angie Tribeca, where she played Rashida's character's mother, bringing their real-life relationship onto the screen. On May 11, 2019, Peggy Lipton died at her home at the age of 72, surrounded by Kidada, Rashida, and several nieces. Her daughters said she passed peacefully and called her their beacon of light. The colon cancer she had once successfully beaten 15 years earlier had returned and spread throughout her body. News of her death brought an immediate outpouring of tributes from across Hollywood, from former co-stars and friends who had known her throughout her 5-decade career. For many people, her passing marked not just the loss of a beloved actress, but the closing of an entire chapter in the story of American entertainment and social progress. Even Quincy Jones, despite all the complications of their relationship, called their love eternal when she died. Their story remained one of Hollywood's most complex and fascinating relationships, a genuine love story that had been damaged by betrayal, but had ultimately produced 2 successful daughters and left a lasting impact on American culture. Peggy Lipton's life was a testament to the possibility of surviving trauma, finding success despite personal struggles, and maintaining dignity in the face of public scrutiny and private betrayal. Her hidden pain and public grace created a legacy that continues to inspire people who face their own challenges with relationships, career pressures, and personal identity. The truth behind her marriage to Quincy Jones reveals the complicated reality that often exists behind glamorous public images. Their love was real, but so was the pain, the sacrifice, and the ultimate betrayal that ended their relationship. Understanding this complete picture helps us appreciate not just their individual achievements, but the human cost of fame, success, and trying to maintain love in an industry that often destroys personal relationships. If this story of love, betrayal, and resilience moved you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who appreciates learning the real stories behind Hollywood's most famous couples. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden truths behind the celebrities we think we know. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that happen when the cameras stop rolling and real life begins.